So, for those of you who don't know, because I love to point out all the multi-talented aspects of our congregation, Richard made that guitar right there. It's pretty awesome, isn't it? I just love that. He's retired and doing what he loves. But thank you, really, to our band. And, we have so many great New Thought artists with so many wonderful albums of New Thought music. And Jack Fowler is one of those. And isn't that just a beautiful song to get us into that place of peace? In the silence, there is unspoken joy, and that is absolutely true. So how is everybody today? Good. And everybody online, hopefully you guys are doing okay too. We're happy that you can join us this way, and we're happy that you all can join us this way. It's wonderful to be able to come together in this physical way as well. And we thank everybody for really just following our protocol of wearing our masks above our noses and social distancing, and it makes everybody feel at peace. I was going to wear the mask that I had on up here, but it sounded a little bit muffled, so I want to be sure that my voice is clear. But that was the mask that Melanie Hazeltine made for the tree, and I thought it went well with my outfit today. So. Okay, so we are in the midst of Advent, and the word Advent literally means the coming or the arrival of someone or something that is wonderful and amazing and awesome. And of course, around the Christmas season, obviously what we're celebrating is the birth of Jesus. But more so in Unity, what we celebrate is the birthing or the revealing more of the Christ Spirit of each and every one of us. And our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, tells us that the Christ is the perfect spiritual self of every human being. And it's the recognition, and sometimes it's hard for us to see that perfect spiritual self of ourselves, right? Is it ever hard to see that perfect spiritual self of other people? Anybody ever have that issue? But it's the reality that perfect spiritual self, it exists in everyone who has been born into this realm of humanity. So last week we talked about the first week of Advent is hope, and how important hope is on our journey. And of course, we talked about Charles Fillmore's favorite Bible verse, which is Christ in you, your hope of glory. And really what that means for us is that as we take the time to allow this Christ self, this perfect spiritual self of us to emerge on a daily basis, that really is our hope of a better life for ourselves and ultimately of a better world, because we're each an integral part of this thing that we call humanity. So I just always want to remind us that we are that important. You are that important. And sometimes we may not feel that important. We may feel like a minuscule something, but you are that important. So today, in Advent, we're talking about peace. And I think you probably kind of got that from everything that we started with. And I love the scripture where Jesus says, it's my peace I give unto you, not as the world gives. So don't let your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. Does anybody ever have an issue with not letting your heart be troubled or not letting it be afraid? How many of us would like to live with a greater sense of peace in our daily experience? How many of us would like to see a greater experience of peace in our country? Yes. And then a greater experience of peace in our world? Yes. Guess where it begins? Carrie sang it this morning. It begins right here within each and every one of us. And that's why I say you are that important. You matter that much, because what you're giving out into the world really makes a difference in the wholeness of everything. So I want to start with a little bit of biblical history. Really, so I'm going to just set this over here if that's okay. So the story, the Christmas story, is found in Matthew and in Luke. And in Matthew starts with this whole genealogy, which was important for Matthew to start with that because they really wanted to connect the story back to the proclamation that, we had this Messiah coming. In Matthew, he focuses more on the journey of Joseph and on King Herod and King Herod's failed attempt at killing Jesus. In Luke, Luke focuses more on the story of Mary and the journey itself into Bethlehem. So when we put these two together, we have this story that all of us have grown up with in one way or another, that we've heard either in church growing up or our families have shared the story. And it's a story that we love to hear. It's a story, and I think it's because we grew up with it. It brings back these memories. But the question begs to be asked, is this story true? And, there's a lot of things in the story that you have to wonder, is it actually true? So I went to a book by Marcus Borg and John Downing Crossan called The First Christmas. And in this book, and Marcus Borg is an amazing author, and he really dives into theology, but he dives into the metaphysical aspect of the Bible. And he talks about parabolic truth. So I want to share this briefly with you. So by definition, a parable is a narrative. It's a story. And as in all stories, something happens. So in Jesus' parables, a man finds a buried treasure in a field. A merchant searches for fine pearls. A woman puts leaven in bread. So we see that Jesus, and we know that Jesus spoke in parables. So people people do something and something happens. That's what a parable is. People do something and something happens. So here's what he says. Here's the thing. No one worries whether the events in the parabolic narratives are factual, because it's the meaning of the parable. It's the parabolic truth that matters. And my friends, there is a reason that Jesus spoke in parables. Because he wanted us to get that, and I think that what we're really ultimately searching for with this beautiful thing that is the Bible is the deeper meaning that lie underneath all the teachings of the Bible. I love the Bible in the sense that it really is. It's our story. It's the unfoldment of us. And it's a wonderful guidebook for how we can more fully and wonderfully live our lives if we're willing to look from a deeper perspective. So in looking at the idea of peace today, we are going to look at the manger in the realm of a parabolic story, in the realm of a parabolic truth. And what that means is, what does this manger aspect mean for each and every one of us? So what we know is that Jesus was born in a manger. That's what it says in the Bible. Jesus was born in a manger. Do you know what a manger is? It's essentially a trough where animals eat their food. So this is not a warm and cozy place. This is not really the ideal place for Mary to give birth. And so what the manger represents for us is the unideal, that is not a word I know, but circumstances that we find ourselves in our lives. And I would have to say probably all of us have had some pretty interesting experiences that were not the most ideal experiences in our lives. And we have some situations today that are not ideal in our lives. And we're taking a look at our country right now. This is not an ideal situation. This is a manger experience. The loss of a job, a health diagnosis, the economy, being in the midst of a pandemic. There's a lot of experiences that we have that are not really ideal experiences for us. So when we look at this, these are the experiences that we're having where we're not feeling a lot of peace about it. I don't know about you guys, but when it comes to the political climate of our country today, I struggle with having a lot of peace about it. And I have to work really hard at coming back to my center and finding my peace. So the first aspect of experiencing peace, so where I want to go now is the first aspect of experiencing peace in our journey, our daily journey in the bigger things in life, is acceptance. And we talked some about acceptance last week. Now, Mary, imagine this. Mary is a teenager. And all of a sudden, an angel appears to Mary and tells her that she is going to conceive a child and it's going to be of the Holy Spirit. And so can you imagine for Mary at that time, it's hard enough today for a teenager to be pregnant. Imagine at that time, a teenager, an unwed teenager, being pregnant. And so she had to move into acceptance of what was. And, in the stories, it's not like an immediate thing where it's like, oh, yes, this is great. There's some hesitation here in, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? How is this all going to work? But she ultimately moved into a place of acceptance that she was part of something more than just her. And that she could trust this, and trust is another aspect of having peace. Then we have Joseph, and Joseph also gets a visit from an angel. And this angel says, it's true that she is going to conceive of the Holy Spirit, so you can take her as your wife. And again, this is unheard of in that time because for all intents and purposes, it looks like Mary has been, quote unquote, adulterous. And so this is a big deal for Joseph to take Mary as his wife. But Joseph, after some hesitation and some resistance, moves into a place of acceptance. And he has the opportunity now to trust like he has never trusted in his life. And then they have to get on a donkey and travel 120 miles to Bethlehem. Think about that. She's great with child. Any of us who have ever been great with child? Can you imagine being on a donkey for 120 miles? Even if you're not great with child, in all kinds of weather, whatever the conditions are. But they moved into a place of acceptance, again, that this is what was theirs to do. They were a part of something greater. And then they get there, and there's no room in the inn. They can't even be in a warm place that's comfortable. They know this is something really big, but the people don't know it. And so they end up at, my mind is, thank you, at a stable. In less than ideal conditions, but again, they move into an acceptance of this. My friends, I don't know about you, but I complain when I'm stuck in traffic. I complain when the line is not moving as fast as I want it to. Or how about when we get delayed at the airport? How many of us lose our peace in these things that aren't even a big deal? And yet what this story shows us that, for me, and ultimately where this is going today, is if we can't find our peace in the small things, we're not going to find our peace in the bigger things. So because our human tendency is to fight against, is to move into resistance. So I asked Simone Height if she would come up and share with you an experience that she had, that I got to journey through this experience with her, and I was in awe of her ability to accept what was and to be present in the midst of this way less than ideal situation. So I give you Simone.
Hi. So I'm going to take 3 weeks and put it in 5 minutes. My son, I was in Lebanon working, and I got a call from Cox South that said, your son has been just air vac'd in, get to Cox South immediately. So I beat my ex-husband out of Ozark, if that tells you anything. And I walked in the door, and I told him who I was, and the church chaplain came out and greeted me, and my heart stopped. The worst thing you've ever want to know, the first person you see is the chaplain. So he took me back, and I finally looked at him. I said, is he alive? And he said, yes. And at that point, before I knew anything else that would happen, I said, okay, it's downhill from here. So I just said, God, please stand by me. We're going to go through this, and everything is going to be all right. Well, come to find out, he was in a car accident. They had to cut him out. They had to air vac him in. And here's the grace of God, and I didn't find this out till later, where, and again, this just made it all right, because I knew with God all things are possible. Matter of fact, I got that this morning in the affirmation. Two bystanders that happened to stop on 65 when his car was on fire, they both had fire extinguishers. How many of us carry fire extinguishers in their car? So everything, good for you, everything kind of just added to my calmness. I said, we can do through this. Well, we spent 3 weeks in neuro ICU. We weren't sure he was in a coma. We weren't sure if the brain damage, how much there was. There was burns on the bottom of his feet, but not as bad because of the fire extinguishers. And through this, this was back when you could put an air mattress in Cox South Hospital and have people and take a whole corner, and people would bring you in food and all that. You can't do that anymore. But I had an amazing backbone of friends and family. But the one thing I would not let them say was, oh gosh, what if, or how are you okay, and all. I had to make sure they were on the same page with me, that it was all going to be okay. There was no doubt. I knew there was purpose. If he got him this far, it was going to be okay. So I pretty well took care of most everybody that came through. But I got to stay there for 3 weeks, and they brought him out of the coma. It's hard seeing your child. When I first walked in his ICU room, I'm an ex-nurse, and it took me to my knees. So the tubes and everything, and his paleness. I'll come to find out he broke most of his back, his clavicle, his hip, burnt feet, but no head injuries, thank God. And then the next thing we had to hurdle was, will he ever walk again? Because the broken back had gotten to the spinal cord. Well, when they went in and did the surgery, the doctor came out and said, you don't realize how lucky you are, and he is, because the cervical cord actually had not punctured. It was 1/1,000,000th of a centimeter to keep him from being paralyzed. So again, that was like day 3. So again, that was just like, yes, I hear you. I'm right there. So again, peace just kept building. I just kept seeing reasons to believe that everything's going to be okay. And I don't know how I did it, but I never broke down. I never cried. I just took care of people. That was my job at the time. I took care of him. I knew. And then about a week and a half into it, they came in and they said, yeah, he's got feeling. He's going to walk. That's when I broke down. I just literally said, thank you. You guys were wonderful. I don't ever want anybody to go through that experience, because that's so rough. I had 5 gray hairs overnight, literally, that weren't there before. But I had that feeling, that knowing that beyond any measure, that it was going to be okay. And I had to just make sure everybody was on the page. That's what I call peace. And I try to tell people, it's not what's going on out here. It's in here. It's your strength, it's your belief, it's knowing that God is right there with you. So that made it through. He's more or less fine.
Thank you, Simone. I mean, and I was there, so I watched her and I was in awe of her ability to stay the course. And it really was that inner journey that she took of just trusting and accepting and continuing to bring that in, not only just for herself to bring that in from the outside, but it was an amazing thing to journey through with her. So let's talk for a minute about what are some of the things that keep us from peace in our daily lives. Obviously, unforgiveness, resentment, regret, a sense of separation. Ego is all of that. But one that I want to focus on a little bit is busyness and hurriedness. Anybody deal with busyness and hurriedness? It's like the menu of the day in our culture. So let's look at how maybe we can move more into out of that, and knowing that that's just part of our journey, because it is kind of part of our lives, but how we can manage that differently and create a greater sense of peace in our lives. So again, we're going to go back to the Christmas story. There was a reason why Jesus wasn't born in the inn, because that Christ spirit cannot be born in a crowded mind and in a crowded heart. It cannot be born in a realm where there is just so much going on all the time. It has to be born in that silence, and it has to be born in that stillness and in that, if you will, kind of that darkness, because transformation happens in the inside realm where we cannot see that it's happening. Look at a cocoon. That all of the major transformation that is going to allow that body to emerge. All of that transformation that is going to allow that butterfly to emerge, it's happening in the darkness and the stillness and the silence of the cocoon. Or you look at a seed that you plant in the ground, and the major transformation that is happening where? Again, in the darkness, in the stillness, in the silence of that seed. And what that is, it's a blueprint for what is there to emerge, and every single one of us has that blueprint in us, of course, which we call the Christ. But it cannot be done if we stay in that hustle and bustle and the hurriedness and the busyness of life. Now, I'm not saying that because, at the Christmas season, that's kind of part of it, isn't it? It's kind of the hustle and bustle. There's a lot of joy to be had in that as well. So I don't want to diminish that aspect of it. But what we know is that Scripture tells us to be still and know. Jesus said, "Come apart a while." And he not only told us this, but he modeled it for us. Jesus went apart over and over and over again. And wouldn't you say that he had some less than ideal conditions in his life? And how did he manage those? He managed those because he took that time to be still. I've talked before about having a trigger, and I like to bring this up, quite often, because having a trigger will help you get to that place of peace quicker. And so one of the things that I worked with was I would, just let myself be in my everyday experience. I would allow myself to go into the silence, do some deep breathing, get myself still, feel that peace, and squeeze my thumb and my finger together. And then I would let it go. I'd come back out. I go back in, feel the peace, until now today, literally when I squeeze my fingers together, it's a physical feeling inside of me. I can feel, where do we feel that anxiety? We feel it right here in our gut, don't we? I can immediately feel that letting down, that letting go. So one of the most important things that you can do is take that quiet time apart. Be still and know. Practice that presence. Another important part of the peace process for us is trust. And that trust is knowing that your good can never be withheld from you, no matter how long it takes. When we look at the stories in the Bible, I think immediately of the Israelites, and they were, out, wandering for 40 years, or the 40 days and 40 nights, whatever it is. It simply means it was a long time, or it was as long as it took. But they always were led to their greater good, because your good can never truly be withheld from you. So I want to share with you a story that Reverend Richard Mirage shared, and it's about a man named Robert May. And Robert May, when he was a child, he was very small and he was picked on a lot. But when he grew up, he became a copywriter at Montgomery Ward's. How many of us remember Montgomery Ward's? Some of you probably don't, because you're too young. It was a great, a store that we used to frequent. Robert gets married to a woman named Evelyn, and within a year, they have a little girl. Well, about the end of this year, Evelyn is diagnosed with cancer. And so for the next 3 years, Evelyn spends most of her life in the hospital. And here's Robert, he's working, he's trying to take care of his little girl. His wife is in the hospital most of the time, and unfortunately, when the little girl was 4, his wife passed. And Robert found himself in just this deep grief. And here he was trying to make ends meet. And he and his daughter lived in just a 2-room apartment. He just didn't have any money. And so Christmas comes around, he doesn't have money to buy anything for her. So he decides to start creating a story for her. So he creates a character, and then he begins to embellish on this character and embellish on this story. And so for Christmas, he put it in a little book form. Well, the CEO of Montgomery Ward got wind of this. And so he went to Robert and he asked if he could buy the copyright to this little book. And so Robert sold the copyright to him for a nominal fee. And the next year, every child that went to a Montgomery Ward's was given this little book. And over 1 million of these little books were given out. Well, a major publisher caught wind of this and went to Montgomery Ward's, and they wanted to buy the publishing rights to it. But an unprecedented thing happened in that the CEO gave those rights back to Robert May. And Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer became a multi-million selling book. Of course, we know it turned into a movie, and Robert May obviously benefited from that. He was there in the midst of his major experience. He had to accept what was and just do the next right thing that was there for him to do. I was talking to James Masters this week, and James shared with me that a minister once told him to listen to God and do what God tells you. And for me, that's, we listen to that inner voice. We accept and we move to that place of trust, and we listen to that inner voice, and we just do the next right thing. Because the next right thing, even if it seems like nothing is happening, we go back to that place of trust and know that it's in that inner realm that things are happening, that we just keep putting our foot, in front of the other foot, in front of the other foot, and we keep on going on. So trust. And then lastly, the title of today's talk is Peace Possible. Like when you look at our country today, when you look at our world, and really any time in our history, we have to look and go, wow, is peace even possible? Well, first of all, you have to define what that means for you. And if you think that peace means that all of us are going to have the same opinions on everything, and we're never going to have differing opinions, you're not going to have peace, because it's just not ever going to happen. But again, I want to go back to, for me, what the point of this talk is it's not about what's going on in the world around us, my friends. It's all about what's going on inside of us. And again, if we cannot find peace in the small things in our life, if we cannot find ways to feel that experience of peace in our daily life, when the big things of life happen, we're going to struggle. And not only that, we are at choice every moment on what we are putting out into the world, because we are a part of a collective consciousness. And so if we're getting freaked out all the time, if we're getting mad and angry, if we're judging people, if we're gossiping, if we're doing these things, then what are we putting out into the greater consciousness? More of that. And so the important thing is, what is it in your daily life that takes your peace away? And this is really what I want to give you as your homework this week if you decide to do the homework. And what this is going to take, it's going to take awareness. It's going to take awareness for us to wake up. And for me, it's when I'm behind a vehicle that just isn't going the speed limit. And I just want you to go the speed limit, that's all. It's like in those moments catching that feeling in my stomach and going, whoa, let it go. This is nothing. This is nothing. It's those moments when I'm watching the news and something triggers me and I have to let it go and move into trust. Trust that there is something greater that is unfolding here that is happening underneath that I cannot see, but I trust, and I love it. That's what Simone kept saying. She kept trusting and knowing that God is in control. Love is in control. Goodness is in control. It's in control, even when we can't see that it is. It is. And I promise you. And here's the thing that we have to know. It may not be in our lifetime. But every time that we put peace into the world, we are a part of bringing that energy about in the world around us. And you know what? That is what moves us out of rugged individualism into the recognition that we are all a part of something bigger and something greater, and that is the emergence of the Christ Spirit, the emergence of the Christ Spirit in us that wakes up others, and ultimately that is what we're going to see more of in our country and in our world, is that goodness and that kindness and that compassion and that oneness, that desire to be there for each other, to take care of our planet, to take care of everything. So I want to close with this little saying by Lao Tse. He said, if there is to be peace in the world, there must be peace in the nations. If there is to be peace in the nations, there must be peace in the cities. If there is to be peace in the cities, there must be peace between neighbors. If there is to be peace between neighbors, there must be peace in the home. And if there is peace in the home, there must be peace in the heart. So I want to remind us, and you can say it with me, let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. And I say to you, namaste and namaste. All right. So now is a time in our service that we have the opportunity to support the ministry financially. We are so grateful that all of us are a part of this and that we have really done so well this year with COVID. Let's take our gifts in our hands. You can give through a lot of different ways. There's a basket in the back here, but you can give through our Tithely app by writing a check to the church. You can give through our website, and soon you'll even be able to donate through our Facebook page. So let's share in our gift blessing together. Divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all